I mean, from a shopper's perspective, scan and pay seems incredibly simple. I was compared to building a house. Painting the walls looks easy, right? But routing the plumbing and the electrical behind the drywall is an absolute nightmare.
That is a perfect analogy. You see the paint, which is the consumer interaction layer, point the camera, see the basket, pay. But the back-end dependency layer, the plumbing required to make those 4 steps happen, is staggering.
It's an iceberg, isn't it?
It really is. Every single one of those actions relies on a cascade of enterprise-level systems firing perfectly in real time. Building a basic barcode scanner on a phone is easy.
Any college student could do that.
Exactly. But building a system that instantly interfaces with legacy pricing databases, that's a different universe. When you scan that barcode, the app has to evaluate dynamic real-time pricing for that specific store, check for localized promotions, and route your ID through the loyalty database.
All in a fraction of a second.
Less than 200 milliseconds across hundreds of different smartphone models. And when you hit pay, it has to securely route through multiple payment service providers and instantly generate a legally compliant digital receipt.
Wow. The happy path, like scanning a perfect box of cereal, can be prototyped fast. But it's the edge cases that kill internal projects.
The final 20%. The edge cases are the graveyard of internal retail software projects. Think about loose produce. A customer wants to buy a single apple or some fresh croissants from the bakery section.
Right, because those don't have standard barcodes on them.
Exactly. Or items sold by weight at the deli, age-restricted goods like wine. Or, crucially, in markets like Germany, products with a FAND, the bottle deposit.
Oh, yeah. Processing a single apple means the app suddenly has to interface with the Scale API, match the PLU code, verify the weight, all without throwing an error.
And if an internal app stumbles on that bakery item, the entire promise of scan and pay just evaporates. If that promise of a seamless journey breaks, the shopper loses trust.
They just go right back to the regular checkout line.
They have to, and they might never use the app again.
Which is awful for adoption. Building your own scan and pay in-house isn't necessarily a bad idea, but it really only makes sense if a grocery store wants to transform into a self-checkout software company.
That's the reality of the resource commitment.
Yeah. For everyone else, relying on a vendor, it just mitigates risk. It speeds up deployment and lets the retailer focus on what actually matters, selling products and building customer loyalty.
It lets them be the best possible supermarket, not a stressed-out software firm.
Perfectly said.
When scan and pay works perfectly, the technology is essentially invisible to you. You're just a person buying groceries.
Right. But the moment you step behind the scenes, into the corporate boardrooms and the IT architecture of these massive global retailers, you realize the illusion of magic is hiding a sprawling, hyper-complex web.
A massive web of enterprise operations, yeah.
So our mission today, we are looking at the ultimate corporate dilemma. Should a giant retail chain try to build their own scan and pay software completely from scratch? Or should they rely on a specialized vendor?
Right. It's a strategic question that really forces a business to define its core identity. Because what is a supermarket, really? Is it a highly optimized logistics operation, or is it a software development company?
And we know there are highly capable retailers out there who do try to build this themselves, but we are going to outline the strategic benefits and the logical conclusions of letting a specialized vendor handle that heavy lifting. Because to understand the build versus buy debate, we have to look at what's actually being built.
Which is often misunderstood.
Totally. We are talking about massive global grocery chains here. They have enormous, highly capable IT departments.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't a strong IT team just own this from day one?
It's a fair question, but it's not about capability. It's about specialization and a resource allocation. Because surviving the launch is only half the battle. Building internally isn't a one-time project. It creates a permanent product organization.
The day after launch trap.
Exactly. You have to constantly maintain iOS and Android updates. You have to manage security, like PCI DSS compliance, and device life cycles.
Our sources had a really illuminating case study on this, a dedicated 15-person team. And their entire job was just to manage and maintain internal scan and pay work.
15 brilliant engineers just trapped in maintenance mode, keeping the lights on.
Right. But by switching to a vendor, capable IT teams can redirect those minds toward things that actually matter for the retailer.
Like retailer-specific goals, loyalty programs, CRM algorithms, broader store transformation. You want your digital talent building the unique brand experiences that make customers actively choose your store, not debugging camera APIs.
Absolutely. Because while that internal team is bogged down testing iOS updates, The business side is suffering delays. Which brings us to the metrics that actually matter here: time to market and actual customer adoption.
Because a technically perfect app is useless if it takes 5 years to build and no one uses it.
Yes, the timeline contrast is wild. Internal builds take years of defining flows, testing edge cases, running closed betas. But the vendor model is completely different.
A vendor brings broad evidence from thousands of live stores. They aren't guessing based on one retailer's assumptions.
Let's cite the ROSSMANN example from the data. Using a vendor SDK, ROSSMANN went live in just 8 weeks.
8 weeks? That is incredibly fast for enterprise retail.
And then look at the HIT Supermarkets data to see what high adoption looks like. The vendor handled 10% of all transactions at HIT.
10% share for a self-checkout tech is massive.
And the basket sizes. At HIT, scan and pay baskets averaged 41 euros 40 and 19 items, compared to the average German grocery basket of just 21 euros and 11 items.
You're almost doubling the basket size. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you're removing the physical friction of traditional checkout.
You're not unloading 19 items onto a belt and frantically repacking them.
Exactly. But it feels like we've been talking entirely about smartphones, bring your own device, or BYOD.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah.
What about the shoppers who don't want to drain their battery? Or they just refuse to download another app? Doesn't relying on a vendor box you into one specific smartphone path?
A strong vendor actually offers far more flexibility. They support SDKs, standalone apps, and professional handheld scanners all in the same ecosystem. Running those enterprise devices securely is a totally different product challenge than building an iPhone app. But at HIT, a third of their scan and K transactions were via those handhelds, and 2/3 via smartphones.
That makes total sense. And there's another human element here, too: the store employees.
Loss prevention. This is vital. Store staff need proper tooling, like a supervisor app, to efficiently handle age checks and spot checks.
You don't want them just randomly stopping people, right?
Right. Random checks frustrate honest shoppers. A specialized vendor provides AI-based risk scoring. It targets suspicious sessions based on live behavioral data while letting honest shoppers breeze through.
So it reduces employee workload and shrinks theft at the same time.
Exactly. It makes the staff's job easier, which means they'll actually support the technology on the floor.
But this brings up the highest strategic level of the discussion: corporate control. If we outsource the core engine of our checkout, the hardware integrations, and the loss prevention, what does the retailer actually do?
This is the big boardroom fear.
Right. Aren't we giving up the customer relationship and our own data? How do we differentiate ourselves from the supermarket across the street if we're using the same vendor?
It's all about a very strict division of labor. Partnering with a vendor doesn't mean surrendering control. The vendor is just an invisible technology provider managing the infrastructure.
The scan logic, device compatibility, analytics suite.
Exactly. But the retailer retains total ownership of the customer data. They own the brand UI, the loss prevention policy, the loyalty strategy.
So the retailer's still driving the car. They just didn't have to smelt the steel and build the engine from scratch.
Precisely. And this is how you avoid the danger of digital silos and fragmentation. When you build internally, one team builds the app. Later, another team buys self-checkout software. Another does digital receipts.
And nothing talks to each other.
Right. But a vendor provides a unified self-checkout ecosystem.
Which allows the retailer to immediately monetize retail media.
Yes, that is the financial game changer.
You're turning scan and pay into a surface for sponsored placements, contextual promotions, and recommendations to drive higher basket sizes, all while they're actively shopping.
Internal teams usually put that on a 5-year roadmap. A vendor ecosystem has it natively built in on day one.
So pulling all this together for you, the learner, building your own scan and pay in-house isn't necessarily a bad idea, but it really only makes sense if a grocery store wants to transform into a self-checkout software company.
That's the reality of the resource commitment.
Yeah. For everyone else, relying on a vendor, it just mitigates risk. It speeds up deployment and lets the retailer focus on what actually matters: selling products and building customer loyalty.
It lets them be the best possible supermarket, not a stressed-out software firm.
Perfectly said.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder off mic. Next time you are in a store, just look at the digital touch points around you. Consider how much of our modern world relies on this invisible division of labor between the brands we trust and the highly specialized vendors silently powering them behind the scenes.
It really makes you think. How many other simple apps on your phone are actually massive hidden icebergs? It is a fascinating ecosystem. Well, that is all for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.